Hi there, welcome to the Jester's room. I am the Jester, nice to meet you. Today's video will be something I've been wanting to do for a while now, but never got around to doing, and that is do a review video. So please bear with me while I iron things out for the first few reviews that I do. I wanted this review to be about a game that has given me certainly over 100 hours of joy, as well as the game be from a series that is very close to me and close to my heart, as it is a series that I grew up playing. And so, for those reasons, I chose Breath of the Wild. Disclaimer, this video will be going over different aspects of the game, including its DLC, so there will be spoilers. If you haven't played the game yet and wish to not be spoiled, please leave the video now. There will be opinions stated in this video on how I view the game. You can feel free to disagree all you want, as those are your own opinions. I cannot help change that. So, with all that being said, and all the formalities now out of the way, I'd like to dive on into how I feel about the game. I'll be covering different aspects of the game as I see fit, and as I do, I won't say what I liked and disliked the most, but what I will say is I'll just say how I feel about those aspects, as my view on the game is very mixed. I'll go and like something, and then immediately say that something else about that it's not necessarily bad, but it could have been done a lot better. To start, I wish to talk about the story, from both the base game and the added content from the Champion's Ballad, as all of that is marked with a story objective in the game's mission list. For a quick summarization of the story, Link wakes up from a 100-year sleep with amnesia. A disembodied voice of Zelda speaks to him, saying that he must save Hyrule. He leaves his resting cave and meets an old man who gives him the runaround of the Great Plateau, making Link go to each shrine in order to obtain the paraglider. Upon leaving the Great Plateau, Link heads towards Kakariko, meets with Impa, and is told to go to Atenno to meet Purah, who then upgrades Link's Sheikah Slate, only to go back to Kakariko to be told his main objectives: gather his lost memories and reign back control of the divine beast that killed his fellow champions but just before Link himself perished. The memories mainly show Link's time with Zelda and how she would act towards him until a certain point where she changes demeanor, which is only explained in her diary in Hyrule Castle, while the divine beast show his time with the champions. Each divine beast comes with one memory of Link and the related champion to the divine beast. So for an example, if he went to Vah Ruta, he'd get a memory of Mipha. Once Link has finished all 4 divine beasts, the Champion Ballad then begins, where Zelda tells Link to return to the Great Plateau. He then obtains a powerful weapon that defeats all enemies in one hit, but reduces Link's HP to 1/4 of a heart, and is only with him for a temporary amount of time. There's not much story that goes on here until Link has completed all 4 new shrines on the Great Plateau, where his new objective is to go to the new areas marked on his map, where he talks to the same people he talked to during his first visit into the town nearby, only to learn that there were certain trials that the champions had to go through in order to get their divine beast, which Link then himself has to do. With each new set of shrines finished, Link receives a memory-type cutscene from the courtesy of Cass that shows Zelda recruiting each champion. The ending of DLC Pack 2 ends with you fighting against a giant monk, giving Link his own divine beast called the Master Cycle Zero. A final scene occurs where it shows the king telling Zelda about her duties, and all the champions taking a picture together. To wrap the story up, Link then sets out for Hyrule Castle, with the Master Sword being totally optional, not at all required in order to beat Ganon. Upon making it to the highest point, which is the Sanctuary, Ganon drops down after Zelda is no longer able to hold him back. The 4 divine beasts fire 4 massive lasers at Ganon, and then shortly after, Ganon has been destroyed and Hyrule is saved. Link and Zelda then go to see Hyrule restored to its former glory, with their first destination being Zora's Domain. Long-winded, I know, but it feels a lot shorter than actually described. I have a few gripes with the story and the characters that it involves. However, I did enjoy the story for the most part. My major problem is that it felt a little bit rushed, and there are some things that never really got explained. At one point, Impa is telling you about this calamity from 1,000 years ago, but the exact same thing happened 100 years ago? It doesn't really make much sense, at least to me. When you compare the story to the game it's in, the story just felt like an afterthought, while the main focus was exploration, which is exactly what the devs wanted to do since they wanted to return to their roots. However, this was something I wasn't a major fan of since, and this is purely from how I am as a gamer, I thrive off of a masterfully created story with characters that grow throughout the story's progression, which leads me into the characters in Breath of the Wild. The characters in the game felt very lacking, for, lack of a better word. You didn't learn much about the champions or Impa or Purpura. This is due to the fact that these characters were already established into the world, so you as a player weren't able to connect with them. Your first impression of Rivali into the story was that he was just some narcissistic ass who's jealous of Link being the one to finish Ganon. And that's all he was ever really viewed as in my eyes, because nothing was ever presented to change my view on him. You also weren't able to really get a feel on these champions because, well, they died. You knew them 100 years ago, but when you woke up, you didn't. And you can't find out more about them. Even in the Champions Ballad, it didn't give you anything new to let you relate to them more or have your view changed. Rivali was still arrogant, Urbosa was still the mom friend, Mipha was still the love interest of Link, and Daruk was just, like a dude bro. An example that I think fits the style of an amazing characterization in Zelda game would be Groose. Why him? It's simple. At the beginning of Skyward Sword, he's introduced as the Knight Academy's big old bully. But as the story goes onward, Groose begins to change as a person upon landing on the surface. He slowly turns from this bully who's infatuated by Zelda to a decent person who legitimately wants to help Zelda and Link save the world from demise. Back to Breath of the Wild though, I would have preferred it if you got to go through Hyrule how it was 100 years ago to establish this connection with everyone, and then it turns into what we got as a base game. There's one thing I'd like to touch on before moving off of all the story-related content, and that's the ending. I may think that the story in Breath of the Wild was, it was pretty okay, but fell short of the mark when compared to other games in the Zelda series. But there's one thing that I will say that I absolutely did not like about the story. And that would be the ending. And not because the story was over. I didn't like it for the simple fact that it left us hanging hard. You beat Ganon, save Zelda and all of Hyrule. Great. If it had been left with, do you really remember me? That would have been fine. But then they added this extra scene where Zelda and Link are together and about to travel off to Zora's domain to see why Vah Ruta stopped moving. You're left with a sense of, well, why did Vah Ruta stop moving? How are they planning on helping Hyrule recover? And none of this is ever answered, and it leaves you desiring more. Which is cool and all if you enjoy being, left on a cliffhanger, but I just don't. I wish there was something more to do after the story, which I understand no Zelda game has ever done before. However, Zelda games in the past have left you with a more clear and concise ending. In Twilight Princess, you stuck the Master Sword in Ganondorf's chest, killing him effectively, and then you returned the sword to its pedestal. Hyrule is safe, and so is the Twilight Realm. And that's it. In Ocarina, you've beaten Ganon, returned the Master Sword, and then returned to live your own childhood out. The only games that come remotely close to Breath of the Wild's cliffhanger ending would be Wind Waker and Phantom Hourglass, but both games get wrapped up in the game following it, which Wind Waker getting wrapped up with Phantom Hourglass, and then Hourglass getting wrapped up with Spirit Tracks. And maybe that's what they're planning with Breath of the Wild, but as it stands now, it just left a bad taste in my mouth. I don't think the story is horrible by any means. I've definitely seen worse from a game, but I've also seen far better. Moving along though, I'd like to move from the story to the other half of the game, and that is the actual gameplay. And much like the story, I have very mixed feelings about the gameplay and its controls. First off, every Zelda game I've played besides Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks, and Skyward Sword, you had to use B to swing your sword, which was moved to Y in the game, which just made things very awkward. And why? Because B is now a dedicated run button and X is a jump. And how does this make things awkward? Well, for me, I have big thumbs, and they cover up all the buttons on my Joy-Con. which makes things like jumping quickly or trying to go into a jump attack or trying to use my sword while I'm on a horse very, very awkward and hard to do. I just kind of, I didn't like the change to the overall controls since I was so used to the other past games. And however, after playing for a good while, I did end up adapting to the new style, and even longer after that point, I was able to learn how to start perfect guarding about 60% of the time. And I say this because there's a learning curve to how the game's controls and mechanics go that you can slowly begin to adapt to. But this leads me into a bit more about the game and how it plays, because there are some major things in the game that need to be taken into account. There's 3 major things overall: weapon durability, weather, and unfortunately, I know everybody hates this, Link's own stamina. We'll begin with the stamina first, because it's the return of something that I once despised in Skyward Sword. That would be the stamina. But honestly, I don't mind it in this game, because the game would be, I don't want to say broken or really easy, but it adds this like element of reality to the game, and it shows that Link isn't just some amazing Hylian with unlimited stamina. He has to stop and rest just like anyone would need to. And it's that kind of reality in this open world game that just, it works. And unlike in Skyward Sword, you're capable of upgrading it and being able to go from, you know, your 1 circle of stamina to 3 full bars of renewable stamina. Yes, renewable. There are ways to have more than 3 stamina meters, however that requires resting in an inn or gathering up different types of food and cooking it that will increase your stamina. And you'll know that they're temporary by the yellow circle that's off to the side of your green stamina wheel. And while we're on the topic of realism in the game's mechanics, let's move on to the weather system in the game. By design, the weather system seems pretty cool, and it functions like a weather system should. If it's hot out without any clouds, the temperature will go up and Link will start to get hot. If it's cold and there's snow all around you, the temperature will start to go down and Link will begin to freeze. The wind can blow things around and roll some things off cliffs and down into a river, or just into a bottomless pit, which is, all in all, really, really cool. However, there's one bit of weather that players that I've talked to just dread to see on the forecast. What would that be? It would be rain. Why do people dread the rain in game? Because in a game like Breath of the Wild, where the ability to climb is such an important way of getting around, the rain just completely ruins it. And whenever it rains in game, any type of climbable surface becomes real slippery and wet, making it impossible for Link to climb up. And those I've talked to about it abhor this mechanic, because it just means they have to spend more time waiting in order to climb up that wall or that mountain. And while that is a very fair criticism, I like the rain to a degree. Obviously, there will be some times where you've got something protruding out and the cliff that you're climbing is covered by that protruding rock or whatever, which means that everything underneath, or everything that you're wanting to climb up, will be away from the rain. However, if just a tiny little bit isn't covered and you try to climb that little bit that's not covered, you're not going to be able to climb up, because the rain just stops you. It'll make you start slipping and falling, making you have to go back to the area where it's not covered. And I just feel like that goes a little bit overboard. And that would be the point where I personally draw the line, because I just think it's dumb. But this does go back to what I was talking about with stamina, and how it puts the sense of realism into Breath of the Wild's world. Because instead of just making it, pure fantasy. Sure, if it rains, Link has to wait in order to be able to climb up, but in real life, so would you. It's something about this realism that's in the game, that's in the game's world, that makes the world itself that you're playing in feel that much more alive. Now, on to the last of the big three mechanics. Weapon durability. While I've harped on the realism in the game for the past two mechanics, this just takes that realism and throws it way overboard. How? Because there are weapons that you can pick up in the game, hit something twice with it, and it just break immediately, which is ridiculous. I don't mind that the weapon durability was in the game, but when I pick up what should be just a standard sword and shield, I expect that to last me at least a couple of fights, not just for about 3 enemies and then break. And this wouldn't be such a problem if you could repair your weapons, but there's no area in the entire game to repair a majority of them. If you have the necessary materials, you can get the champion's weapons repaired, but those are the only ones in the game that you can repair. This also means that you need to manage your weapons inventory to a very serious degree, because you're very limited at the start of the game and can only upgrade it by getting Korok seeds and have Hetsu upgrade your inventory on melee weapons, bows, and shields. And you can only upgrade them one at a time, and every time you upgrade, the price gets higher. Now, there's some really cool weapons in the game too, like the Royal Guard sword, but you don't want to use them in fear of the sword just breaking after a few hits. And to the game's credit, I can understand where it comes from, since different weapons have different strength, and typically the higher the strength, the less durable, but that still doesn't excuse the fact that there are weapons that just break far too easily. And this applies to bows and shields too, since everything that can be used as a form of hitting something that on the enemy, that counts as a weapon. Another way that could have been used instead of just repairing some broken weapon could have been just having a shop somewhere that allowed you to buy weapons beyond just, the ancient weapons. And if the devs had tweaked and refined their durability and weapons a little bit more, maybe it wouldn't have been as bad, but nothing irritates me more than finding a really good weapon and then having to stash it away in my home in order to keep it, that way it doesn't break. Sure, it respawns after a while, but that just means you're off grinding for weapons, shields, or bows. And at least until, you get the Hylian shield from deep down in Hyrule Castle. That has the highest durability stat in the game at 800, which means you've got a long time before it ends up breaking. Speaking of the famous Hylian shield, I do want to touch on one final thing in regards to weapon durability. Link's iconic Master Sword. This is probably the dumbest thing in the entire game, but yes, the Master Sword can, quote-unquote, break. It doesn't necessarily break like the other weapons, but it loses its energy and becomes unusable for 10 minutes. And that may sound trivial, and you can go, oh, it's just 10 minutes before I can reuse what is the best sword in the game, but it's a very big thing, especially since the Master Sword isn't required to beat the game, and it also isn't the strongest sword in the game. It starts off at 30 base damage, and then with the Master Sword Trial, you can upgrade it to 40, then 50, then cap it out at max power, which is 60. But I've collected weapons that were stronger than the Master Sword and lasted longer. Usually those are two-handed weapons, but still. Even just going out of your way to get it, it doesn't feel satisfying to get. In most other Zelda games, you have to work hard in order to get the Master Sword, and go through an insane amount of work in order to pull it from its pedestal. But in Breath of the Wild, the only thing stopping you from getting it is your own laziness to get 13 hearts by completing the shrines, and that's it. You just have to collect 10 hearts since you start with 3 in order to pull the Master Sword. I can understand if you had to complete some major trial before pulling it, or even defeating the Divine Beast first, but none of that is a thing in the game. Link just goes to shrines, gets his hearts to 13, and then can pull the Master Sword. And why 13 specifically? Well, because anything less than that and Link will die. And temporary hearts don't get counted toward the amount needed for the sword. I understand the idea of Link was asleep for 100 years after being defeated, so it's only natural he need to regain his strength in order to get the Master Sword, and you wouldn't expect a insert sport player here to immediately jump back into a pro level game after breaking their insert body part here, so neither should Link, and that's a very fair argument, and I understand it completely, but that doesn't mean I have to like the way it was executed in-game, since there were definitely ways that could have been implemented in order to get the Master Sword, and that still doesn't excuse it from running out of energy and just becoming completely useless. Overall, this may seem like an overwhelmingly negative review, and that's mainly because after playing it almost non-stop for 5 months straight since it launched, then having the Champion's Ballad just being lackluster, I've got more negative to say than positive. However, I don't think this is a bad game. Not at all. As a matter of fact, I think Breath of the Wild is a fantastic game to open the Switch with and close the Wii U on. And I 100% recommend it for any fan of the series. There's a lot of fun to be had with the exploration of the game, and the champion's abilities that you get by doing the story make exploration a lot more accessible and fun. Mainly Rivali's Gale, but it's a wonderful way to start the Nintendo Switch's lifestyle. I just wish they had focused a bit more on getting the story done right, then tweak some things here and there with the mechanics of the game in order to get it just perfect. The praise the game got was definitely deserved, and even the sheer amount of awards it got was deserved. Breath of the Wild even managed to win Game of the Year 2017 at the Game Awards back in December, which should show just how much love the game got from its fans. Shoot, almost a full year into its life and I'm still learning new things about the game, such as chests in the Divine Beast can be smashed with a sledgehammer so you never have to open them. There's so many things that you can find about the game just by doing random things and thinking, hey, I wonder if I can do this, and then actually trying it and seeing that it works. The amount of exploration that in just what you can do and where you can go is absolutely phenomenal, to the point where even trees that you cut down can be turned into rockets so Link can soar to great heights and get to places far faster than if he were on a horse. It's those types of discoveries in the game that can draw people into it and love the game immensely. If I were to rate this game on the scale of 1 to 10 back in March when it came out, you'd find me saying that I'd be putting it at about a 9, which is what everyone else put it as. However, as time has moved on and I've replayed the game more and more, if you ask me now, I'd have to admit that it would be around a 7.5 or an 8, which, you know, is still a fantastic score. Also, if you were to get DLC Pack 2, which is the Champion's Ballad, finish it as soon as you can, because the Master Cycle Zero is one of the most fun things I've used in the entirety of the game. Oh my god, it is so much fun! Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed my opinions on the game, and if you enjoyed this type of video and would love to see more, please leave feedback below. If there was something you thought I could talk about more, or something that I could have done better, please mention that as well. Any and all constructive criticism is welcomed, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next video. Peace out.